So the book that I'm going to be discussing and talking mostly about is called Round as a Tortilla. I did buy it off of the Kindle bookstore app, so it was the easiest way to view it. But it's actually a book about shapes. But throughout the story that it goes through, and it's like explaining different shapes, it's actually using different pieces of the author's culture, which is mainly from Spain and then Guatemala as well. And so you can see in the first part of it, she's talking about sombreros. She says, round as sombreros, round is the moon, round are the trumpets that blare out a tune. And so each of those things are something that she remembers from her experience in Guatemala. And so they have cultural relevance to her. But as you go throughout the book, she also uses different words like round are campanas that chime and ring, or bells. And so you can see throughout the book, it's a mixture of Spanish and English, which I also found very interesting. And it kind of goes through just daily life things, but it's teaching this other concept of within the culture and within the identification of these different objects, like tortillas being round like a circle, or they go on to talk about chips, how they're shaped like a triangle. These different things are also teaching about shapes. And so I really like just like the crossover in this, how it gave different examples from her culture and how they were related. And so primarily my target for this book, like teaching it in a classroom, would be about 3rd or 4th grade level, ELLs preferably from like Latino or Hispanic background. Especially since this intertwines Spanish words, I feel that it would be helpful for students that are at that age where they do have enough accessible English to understand, but also that it's comforting and like they're able to identify that some of that Spanish vocabulary is built in there as well. One of the things as well that I thought that was interesting, and one of the things that kind of led into my instructional planning for the book, was that the examples in this book are there to help us gain an understanding of a different concept. And so like the examples that she's using are culturally relevant, they use a language that a child would understand, but it's also teaching a new subject matter in a way that they can make it relevant for them. And so this kind of made me think a little bit about the Whorfian view, that like the ability to shape language is about how we view the world. But it also has that Vygotskian twist because it is a choice that she's making to identify certain things with certain objects in a different language. And so one of the things that I feel like would be helpful for students is when they're learning English, and that's a literacy concept, would be to identify metaphors and similes and how it's something that we can use to help others understand the meaning that we're trying to bring. And so the assignment for this would be to put them into groups and have them share different examples of concepts that we've learned in class for basic vocabulary words that they're learning, and kind of relate that back to their primary languages and their cultures. And so it can be very different for each of them depending. In this specific example I'm using talking about Latino and Hispanic, and so, you know, if we were going to use the word bright, they could talk about like luminares, which is like the lamps, or talking about something being exciting, and they could express like something about the different holidays or a fiesta that they went to with their family, like using those key words that are from Spanish into that play. And then another one that I thought would be a good opportunity is to talk with the students about how we are thinking while we are reading. I think particularly with this book, it can relate to a lot of students' personal experiences, but it also has an interactive element that I can show you. It asks questions throughout the story that it is, while it is focused on the shapes, it's asking them to think about their view of life and how these concepts they're learning relate back to them. And so I thought this was actually a pretty good model of like a book having ZPD, where like it may not be a back-to-back model, but she's explaining a subject and then giving them a point where they can relate it to themselves, do what she just did. And so it's a little bit of modeling, but I think it's ZPD because it causes the student to ponder. Because she says, how many square things do you know, after explaining these different things and giving them an opportunity to think about what would be culturally relevant to them. And so I thought that was really interesting, that like even though the writer can't hear us, we understand that there can still be a dialogue between us and the writer, and that could be something important for those students to know. And that exercise in ZPD could be a little bit challenging for some students, though. If they don't have that certain level of proficiency with the English, they may not understand quite the questions. And so that is one of the reasons that I did choose the grade level that I chose, because I felt like third and fourth grade would have a little bit more understanding, and also that they could peer tutor each other and give a little bit more cooperation in that as well. So that's why the first assignment was what it was, is they get that opportunity to talk about it before they go through those questions and think about it themselves and understand how these examples are like similes and metaphors, which we use in English a lot. One of the things that I did think in particular would be something that would be useful in the classroom is the interaction level. It provides a lot of feedback for us as teachers to be able to see how they're interacting with the material outside of us, and to be able to understand the level of acquisition the student has achieved, if it's like an implicit or very explicit level of understanding, and how they are learning it based on those things. Thank you.